Hey, what's up, guys? This is Brandon. So today we have a video for you. This is for MG490 with Professor Ladd. What we're going to be doing today for you is I, along with Devin, Brad, Marco, Will, and Jared, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a debate for you guys. And what it's going to be is the debate is about whether or not we feel that college athletes should be paid. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of where we're going to be headed with this. Devin's going to kick it off for us. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.
So you think every player should be paid different salaries?
I think that...
No, just to have you blow up there at the end.
Oh,
but after
man.
all we went through, I couldn't have that happen after you guys went
man.
20 seconds long on top of it.
I just don't know why once you talk about it, instantly people go to, well, what's your
the
plan?
offensive, you're 58th person.
But that's the cop-out that we use for every positive social change,
I love what you
right?
wrote, that, you know, when you're getting something right,
you got to.
I mean, it's the omelet. You know, you're making an omelet.
Well, that's what people don't want to admit. Yeah,
right.
We're going to have to cut some swimming programs.
Yeah.
We're going to have to cut some lacrosse programs. Some schools are not going to be able to afford to play football.
Right, right.
Oh, well.
You got to be careful if you call this a positive social change. I mean, that kind of trivializes social change.
No, it doesn't.
You think?
No, it doesn't.
Oh,
this
absolutely
is
does.
absolutely.
So you agree with the person who compared him to Rosa Parks? Are you kidding?
No.
Well,
how about
that's
hold
what
on.
you're saying?
No, that's so ridiculous.
Change.
You're telling me that I'm making a Rosa Parks just because I said this is
social change?
social?
This is
I didn't
not
say
social.
anything about Johnny Manziel. I'll tell you why this is social change. To me, this is undeniably a human and civil rights issue. This is undeniably an issue of exploitation and control by large institutions over primarily poor people and guiding them in directions to make money for everybody else while doing everything possible to cut them out of the money.
Primarily, so you know the economics of football players they're primarily. I think it's stereotypical primarily poor people.
I'm telling you this.
I don't think that's.
They're letting people in to play football that they, for decades, tried their damnedest to stop allowing into school. For some reasons legitimate, for some reasons illegitimate, but only let them in because they are able to profit for the institution, knowing good and well that they're providing them with access to an education they are not qualified to use. They're bringing them in and selling them a false bill of goods and then doing things like running them in the ground and making them go to birthday parties and take their shirts off to lift weights for the old ladies' day when they come in, and they have no agency, all the way to, like you saw a couple years ago where UCLA withheld those boys stipend checks and they couldn't eat because they didn't make it to some meeting. This is a horrible, oppressive system. And I think that we think as guys are on TV and that a booster might slide them $100 every now and then, they're in a good place, and they're not.
I just think, yes, I think you pay them $2 or $3 grand a year because that's the stipend that kids who can work, who have scholarships, who can work, can make that kind of money. But other than
they're not
that,
making this kind of money for anybody.
And these kids are getting education. All kids of all.
Some of them are getting educations. Most of them are
getting
to go to class.
That's their choice.
Hello, welcome. We're Group 4. My name is Devin Goodnight. Today we are here to discuss college athletes. We're going to be debating, and the debate is going to be centered around whether or not we think college athletes should get paid or compensated in some way for their participation in NCAA sports. The two school of thoughts that are going to be debated are they should be paid and they shouldn't be paid. Will and Jared will argue on behalf that college athletes should be paid, while Marco and Brad will conversely argue the other point. However, there are a few things that both sides agree on. First, they agree that the NCAA is too strict on certain aspects and the allocation of resources is wrong. For example, last year, the NCAA finally lifted a regulation prohibiting cream cheese to be on bagels. The NCAA believed that the cream cheese added some extra additional benefit to the athletes. The NCAA also requires teams to report, compensate, and indemnify any parties who gift them anything. And these gifts could be as simple as something as a cookie or a car wash. Both parties also agree that the NCAA chooses to focus on these issues, these little small issues, instead of the larger ones that matter most. For example, like playing ineligible players. So for our first question today, we are wondering, should college athletes get benefits such as, say, workers' comp, dental, or health insurance or something like that? I know Brad is an insurance major, so he might be able to chime in and give some insight into this question. Brad?
Well, hey, thanks, Devin. I'm Jared Todd. I'm here with
Will Shearholtz.
I'm Marco Capone.
And I'm Brad Kiesling.
The question Devin just asked us is, should college athletes get extra benefits such as workers' comp and dental. Now, Brad here is really interested in insurance and has some enlightening ideas on the topic. Brad?
So basically, I'm going to disagree with providing fringe benefits to college athletes, specifically workers' compensation, dental, as well as health insurance. And the reasoning behind that being simply that if college athletes were to be considered employees, they would have to be considered high-risk employees, which would drive up the rate of the premium used for their coverage. Also, it would add to the number of claims being filed, which would skew any sort of data currently being used for valuing premiums, and I just feel like it would be a terrible idea.
Okay. I think you made some great points there, but Will Nails, as he's called on the baseball mound, and I disagree slightly. We think that if a player is injured in the line of duty, and obviously what they're doing is making money for the university, they should be compensated for all that missed work time later down the road. And I understand it might drive insurance premiums up, but perhaps it's time we take a bite out of these big schools' bloated budgets.
So Jared and Will, you guys believe that college athletes should indeed be paid. So if they are paid, how should they be compensated? For example, do you think that a Division III women's lacrosse player would get paid as much as a Division I college football player? How would this work? Would a profit sharing program work? How would you work this out?
Basically, we're only advocating that players should get paid if they're making money for the school. So a Division I football player is going to be making significantly more money for the university than a Division III lacrosse player. I got a statistic here that says this year the University of Alabama reported $143.3 million in athletic revenues, and obviously a Division III school wouldn't be getting even close to that in athletic revenues. So University of Alabama, I'm going to guess most of that is coming from the football team. So those football players should be getting some money in return for all that money that they're making for the university. That $143.3 million is more than all 30 NHL teams and 25 of 30 NBA teams.
And another interesting thing is that all of that money, it's not just making it for the university, it's also making that money to the NCAA, which is tax-free.
Yes.
Right? So can you elaborate, do you guys have any things on that?
The NCAA is basically a way for a bunch of rich old white guys to make more money off the backs of poor black student athletes. What I mean by that is it's untaxed, it's a nonprofit. All this money that they make off games where, for instance, they prohibit you from taking a water bottle onto the court that doesn't have the Coca-Cola Dasani logo on it, they're selling all these endorsements. That money's coming back to them and to the administrators of these schools, and they're making 10 times or more what the student athletes are making. For instance, the chairman of the NCAA, who really thinks it hurts people to be paid as student athletes, makes $1.6 million to do his job of promoting the corporation. Is it really a nonprofit, or is it merely a tax dodge that shifts money from the people who do the real work to the people who don't do much at all, much like the Congress of the United States of America?
I'm sorry. You can't be throwing stuff in there that has nothing to do with...
I can say that.
But you can understand where his skepticism is coming from, though, can you not?
I understand. Like you pointed out at the beginning in our intro, we don't agree with many of the things that the NCAA does, but Brad and I are in agreement that against their point that student athletes should be paid. We do not think that. When a student athlete, for example, at Butler University on the basketball program or on the women's volleyball team receives a full ride scholarship to Butler, they're granted a $40,000 a year education for 4 years. That is, if I do my math correctly, $160,000 over 4 years. That is more than $40,000 a year is more than most people make coming out of college for a job, for an entry-level job. And the other thing that you have to take into account is what are those student athletes gaining who get these college athletic scholarships? What are they gaining moving forward? The benefits that they get from that, and they're able to bring that on to the working world, that's going to be a huge...
That's not part of the argument, though, because they're still going to get they're still going to go to school,
yeah.
whether they're getting paid or not.
But You don't know that.
Yes,
you
I
don't
do.
know.
They have to go to school, or else they're not going to get paid.
Compete.
They're not going to compete.
All right, let's
No,
take.
I'm saying a student athlete, if they don't get that college scholarship, they're not necessarily going to go to college. There are people that can't afford to do that. So by giving them a college scholarship, they're getting that money so they don't come out of school with debt. So they don't have to pay back that debt. So all the money that they make moving forward after graduating from college with this degree, wherever you go, Alabama, Butler, or I don't know.
But we're saying they're getting this college scholarship and money.
Because we're artificially capping their market worth this way. We're basically saying this is how much you're worth. It's almost like a socialist system where you're like, everybody's worth the same amount. We're going to pay you regardless of your job performance, and then we're going to enrich the people at the top.
There are basketball players, and we're just saying Butler because we go to Butler. There are basketball players on this team right now that are worth more than $160,000 over 4 years to this
More than
university.
$160,000 a year.
The only argument I have against paying student athletes is that it takes the emphasis away from them being a student in the first place.
Yeah.
That leads me to an interesting thought. Maybe you guys might be able to agree on this. Yes, not all students finish 4 years of college. Now imagine if student athletes were to be paid in some way. What if they said, hey, if you sign here, we'll put $5,000 in an account now, today, that you can't touch, and you'll earn interest on. But you can't receive that money until you've graduated 4 years. Now, do you think something like that, an incentive program for students to gain both their education and also probably make the NCAA more money, do you think that would be maybe a viable solution to pay college athletes on some level?
I think on some level, something like that would be, appropriate. I don't think they should be on salary. I don't think they should be on payroll.
No.
Because I don't think they should be categorized as employees of the university. Because then you're skewing where is the line drawn between faculty, students, and if you have, just because you have a student athlete that's generating revenue just by their presence, like they're there to play sports, but they're also there to get an education. And I feel like if you start paying the students, then you're essentially you have an unfair advantage to the other schools that are refusing to pay them, because students are going to be more inclined to go where they can put money in their pocket and get a degree, rather than where they could go and I guess have like the best opportunity to go out on the court or on the field and show their talent as well as get a good education.
I would just say you have to look at where the incentives are at, because it's a good idea in theory, but then, okay, say I'm Kentucky. I know none of these guys normally graduate. Or no, actually, we're going to say UConn. UConn had a 10% graduation rate from 2000 to 2010. Pretty good, which really means their scholarships weren't worth much either because they weren't receiving a degree. Now, let's look at that, and let's say, hey, we're only going to give these guys the money if they graduate. UConn still wants these guys to go there. They have to pay them. What are they going to do? They're going to enroll these guys in joke classes like North Carolina did, graduate them all with degrees in communications patterns of South suburbanites in Hartford, Connecticut, where they have to read, a book or The Little Hungry Caterpillar for their graduate thesis, and then they're going to receive all this money. So then you're going to actually devalue the whole point of the education in the first place as well.
But you can't lump all student athletes into that category, that they're just going to be put into the class that reads Little Hungry Caterpillar for their thesis paper. Right. You have to assume that some people are going to take advantage of this opportunity, and it's unfortunate that there are players that do get their scholarship, take joke classes, and don't use that to benefit them moving forward, but that's their loss. The whole point of getting this athletic scholarship is, in some cases, to gets players off of the streets into a good school, and if they take advantage of it like they can and like they should, that means they get their scholarship money. They don't come out of college with a whole load of debt like some students do, like students right here at Butler in this class, maybe at this table, right. And they get to start making money and putting it back towards their self. And that's just the the positives moving forward of getting a college scholarship without getting paid.
The truth is, though, that athletes do take joke classes. I had a football coach in high school, and he played football in Missouri, and he was advised to major in turf management in order to remain eligible. So schools are actually advising players to take easier courses so they remain eligible to play the sport for the university.
But the key word is advised. You don't have to do that. You can take any classes you want. If somebody says jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge? No. You can. Somebody advises you to do that.
But then again, you don't know how, whether that's an advisement under duress from, say, their coaching staff or their other teammates. Groupthink is a real thing, and if everybody else on the offensive line is doing turf management, and you want to study something else, you're probably going to do turf management stuff. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Another thing to consider is that, let's say Will and Marco are both Division I athletes, and I think you're both finance majors. If not,
marketing.
For this hypothetical, we'll call them both finance. Now, let's say Marco is just the world's worst student, but they push him through with this finance degree, and he's getting by with his tutors doing all the work. Meanwhile, Will, his nickname in the classroom is also Nails. He gets after it. He gets a perfect, 4.0. He would, but he just can't quite get over the hump, and he gets a 3.5. Marco gets a 3.5 because the tutor gets to work. They both graduate. They go into the workplace. They both interview for a position. Marco interviews first. All of a sudden, Will's education gets devalued because Marco got the same degree, but it wasn't really worth it. And that can actually harm the athletes who are good at their job because it devalues their accomplishment of playing a sport and graduating.
So we're running a little low on time here. And so maybe I was thinking, just as a final parting thought, basically from what I've observed, it seems that the NCAA is more or less a monopoly on college sports. It takes advantage of these students, and the NCAA reaps the benefits, and so do the universities. And a lot of times it leaves the kids in really terrible situations. So I know it's impossible to do at this point, but hypothetically, imagine if there was another regulating organization of the NCAA. Do you think that you would see a lot of increases, a lot of better situations for athletes if that were the case? And if it were something that was put out there like that, do you think universities would adopt something like this?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, you're saying that another entity comes to be and starts paying college athletes? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying another regulatory organization that is like the NCAA, operates like the NCAA, but
to make it more competitive, to have a
say the NAIA took Oklahoma and Texas, and then as part of their rules they could pay players.
And I'm just saying, just as a business student, whenever you've just got one company that's doing everything, it always leads to really terrible conditions. Look at the Antitrust Act. Is this not a monopoly by definition? So, I mean, I'm a skeptic, and that's kind of how I look at it. But I believe if there was another regulatory organization, you would see the conditions and the way that these athletes can perceive with their life. I think it would definitely increase. Does everybody agree on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Personally, I believe that's going to be the future. I don't know how long that'll be, but in my opinion, what I'm seeing is, and what I've heard over the last couple of years, especially with the conference realignments and how the whole football situation is going, I'm a firm believer that eventually another entity is going to step in and take over revenue generating sports and begin to pay college athletes.
In regards to actually paying college athletes, I feel like if that does happen, it needs to be very strictly regulated, and it shouldn't only just be you know, oh, you're the star player of this team, well, we're only going to pay you, and we're not going to pay anybody else, because you start coming into, you know, very muddy waters there. You might cause some jealousy on the team. Everyone is mad at that person. Like, why?
Yeah.
You know, not only are they getting more playing
and that would
time,
take away from the sport as well.
Exactly.
I think a solution to that could be, though, is a profit-sharing program across all NCAA sports at that university. However, that does create a different discrepancy when you have a school like ours where we've just got one D1 sport, or 2 D1 sports, you know what I mean? So
we have 19 Division I sports.
Oh, well, excuse my ignorance.
We have one.
But you know what I mean.
One that profits.
You know what I mean. One D1 team that actually brings in a large amount of revenue. So like
that's my point. I think that only the teams that are bringing in revenue for the university or for the NCAA, for that matter, should be paid.
And one last thought, I don't know what you guys think about, maybe keep the system as is and just allow players outside endorsements at their discretion.
I would agree with that, especially again, if you want to bring up video games, for instance, like NCAA football. As far as I mean, I haven't played the game, but as far as I know, they only use their numbers, they don't actually use their names, which I feel like if you're using a likeness of someone, you know, if Madden or MLB or 2K14 tried to get away with something like that, they would get hit with so many lawsuits.
They tried with Michael Jordan.
That I agree with is what, you know, if Johnny Manziel wants to go out and get endorsed by Pepsi, what is stopping him from doing that? There's nothing wrong with that, but for him to be paid for, you know, working hard in the weight room and competing on the field, and somebody like a women's I don't know, what did we say earlier? Women's lacrosse player who works just as hard in the weight room and competes just as hard on the field and is just as much a star in her sport.
You want to bring up Johnny Manziel, though. Johnny Manziel, the school made $60,000 in one semester off of jersey sales, with number 2 jersey. The women's lacrosse player isn't selling any jerseys. So he made $60,000, which is more than his tuition, to go to Texas A&M in just jersey sales.
Well, how do you know it was Johnny Manziel number 2 jerseys?
He's the only he's the only number 2 on the team.
Is he the only number 2 on the team?
I see your point, though, because a lot of times the athletes, with the revenue that they generate in, a lot of the times that the full value of their scholarship is not even anywhere close to the amount of money that they bring.
Exactly.
So there's a discrepancy there.
I think that the outside endorsements would be just right now would be the best route about going to pay the athletes, because like I brought up earlier, you wouldn't have, if the school was paying one person, then the other teammates might get upset. But if you have an outside third party coming in, for instance, Paul George, sponsored by Gatorade, I don't think anyone else on the team is mad that he's sponsored, because he went out and he earned that sponsorship. You know, Gatorade saw him and wanted to put his face with their product. Now, if you're good enough to have a company approach you and want to put your name or your face or your jersey or whatever on the product, I think that that's your right to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the school or the NCAA should have any say in that, but as far as like just flat out paying students to come and play sports at a university, I don't think that should happen.
Another thing to consider is if you did allow endorsements, guys like Marco and Will that are, you know, Division I baseball players, I'm sure there are people that would, if you had the Marco Capone baseball camp and you said, I'm a Butler Division I baseball player, even if you didn't have that name recognition, like if I was a little kid and I saw a name and him running it, I would go in a heartbeat, you know? Especially now that I've seen him play and realized his excellence.
Okay, well, I think this has been a very interesting discussion today. Thank you guys for talking.